drivers are fantastic for their big swooping distance lines, and putters are great for their slow speed and controlled landings. So what if you could take those two discs and put them together? Well, if you're looking for that, you're looking for a mid-range. For your first mid-range, you're going to want to throw it often, so you're going to want to find something that's comfortable in your hand. The more comfortable it is, the more you're going to throw it, and throwing a mid-range well is definitely a good skill to invest time in. For the purpose of a mid-range, you're going to use your mid-range when you want to go straight and you want to control the landing around the target. This is generally for shots that are a little bit longer than you're comfortable throwing a putter, but not all the way up to a driver. Personally, I like to reach for a mid-range just about every chance I can where I know that I can reach the hole, because that's going to get me more comfortable throwing with more power. And if I can reach a hole with a mid-range that I used to be able to reach with my driver, that means I've added distance, and that's going to translate into more accuracy and more control elsewhere on the course. If you've only thrown drivers, you'll know that if you have an understable one, it'll tend to flip pretty quick. And that is good for getting to this angle, but it doesn't provide you much control. If you have a mid-range that's understable, you're going to be able to scale that turn with your power really well. It's going to help you develop that skill for a clean release and good angle control, because it's going to reward that more than a driver would. Now, because mid-ranges are slower, they're not going to go as far as drivers. So if you do need something that's going to go your maximum distance, you are going to want to grab a driver. But for just about everything else, I like to grab my mid-range. So if you've got a mid-range, how do you decide when to throw that versus your driver? Well, the first thing to look for is a straight shot. Because mid-ranges are slower, they're going to be easier to get on that dead straight line. Drivers tend to flip over and glide to the right and then back left, and they have a lot of variances left and right. But the slower discs, like your putters or your mid-ranges, they're a lot easier to get to go just nice and straight. And also, when they land, they don't tend to skip as much. Because drivers have that sharp beveled edge, they carry a lot of speed into the ground because they don't get as much drag from the air. So they hit the ground and they tend to flare up to the left or to the right if you're throwing a forehand or lefty backhand. Whereas mid-ranges, because they're slower, they've lost a lot of their speed by the time they hit the ground. So they tend to just settle nicely next to the basket rather than taking that big skip. So what mid-range should you get? The first thing to look at is feel. You want to decide whether you want a beadless or a beaded mid-range. A bead, just like in putters, is a small ridge of plastic around the bottom that helps the disc maintain its stability a little bit longer, and it can provide a point of reference for your grip. I tend to prefer a micro bead on my mid-ranges because it gives me that point of reference, and I tend to get a cleaner release with the beadless mid-ranges, so it tends to give me like a best of both worlds situation. If you don't have a lot of experience with mid-ranges, I would start with something that's straight to understable. It's going to be your go-to disc in the woods because it's going to fly so straight. Something like a Warrant, a Truth, or an EMac Truth is a great start because those are going to be able to turn up to flat and then hold a nice straight line. The EMac Truth tends to have a little bit more finish at the end, but they all tend to fly very straight. Oh, yikes. You know, trees happen. And honestly, because mids get thrown in the woods a lot, they tend to hit more trees than some of my other discs. So it's a good idea to, especially for your first mid-range or your go-to mid-range, to get something in a nice durable plastic, like Lucid or Fusion or something like this Moonshine plastic. This is going to withstand a lot more tree hits than something like a Biofusion or the Prime. Now, some people do like their mid-ranges in the Biofusion or the Prime plastic, but that's so they can have the same mid-range and have different flights out of it by cycling it and getting different levels of wear, but that tends to add a little bit of inconsistency. So if you're looking for something that's going to be reliable and fly the same way every time, you're going to want to get something in the premium plastic. So thanks for watching. I've got links in the description to all the mid-ranges I mentioned, and we'll see you next time.